Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
All right, Joe had a really successful haul of Auburn and Ole Miss players this year's Major League Baseball draft. But we also have some real names out here that got drafted very early. A lot of them, the sons of famous pro athletes, be it baseball or football. And Joe, why don't you start off and tell us who got drafted number one?
Yeah, so Dan, Jackson Holliday, the son of former big leaguer Matt Holliday, most notably with the Rockies and the Cardinals. And he had maybe the best high school career I've ever seen on paper. He batted like 685, 695 his senior year, set the amateur record with 89 hits in a single season, just crazy numbers. So he goes number one overall. And then you have number two overall, one of my favorite, and I think you said your favorite, Atlanta Brave of all time, Andruw Jones. His son, Druw Jones, goes number two overall to the Arizona Diamondbacks. And, just really excited about him. He grew up in Georgia and got to play high school baseball there, was committed, I think to either LSU or Vanderbilt. I can't remember which one, but he's always been a high profile prospect, and he projects, to be a star outfielder, I would think, like his dad at the next level. And then also throw in Kumar Rocker, of course, went number three overall after not signing last year out of Vanderbilt. Took a year off and played some semi-pro baseball. He gets drafted by the Rangers. And then the other player I wanted to throw in was Justin Crawford, the son of Carl Crawford, who played with the Rays most notably. And Justin Crawford, just like his dad, has electrifying speed on the bases. And I always loved watching Carl Crawford play because he was so fast. And I feel like that's kind of a lost art, in pro baseball or baseball at any level. We don't see as many guys that are speedsters still in bases. And so definitely hoping that Justin Crawford can bring that art back.
Well, that's right, Joe. I feel like you saw a little bit of it more in college baseball this year than you have in the past with two of the teams that made the College World Series. And of course, one of them made the College World Series final in Oklahoma, being a team that was about most of what they did. I believe Texas and Oklahoma were 1-2 this year in stolen bases, and both of them were very good at that. And that was part of why they made it as far as they did. But you're right. I mean, in general, I feel like you don't see that kind of near as much. But going back to Druw Jones, I mean, I'm really excited to see the way he is because, I mean, when I was a kid, Andruw Jones was by far my favorite Braves player. And I mean, he was a solid hitter, don't get me wrong, and he hit some home runs, but I just loved the way he played outfield. When a ball was hit and it went into center field, you felt like he was going to get every single one, and it wasn't an unrealistic expectation. And it was very rare that he ever missed a ball, that he didn't get one that he should have. And there were ones that maybe you even thought that it wasn't possible he would get to, and he would still chase him down. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen a center fielder that is as good as he was.
Yeah, it was so effortless for him. He won, I think, 10 consecutive Gold Glove Awards in his career at center field. And, the travesty is very similar, ironically, to the Freddie Freeman situation, because both of them actually, when they left the Braves and were not re-signed, I think Andruw Jones also went to the Dodgers the very next year. Mm-hmm. And you kind of felt like, we never got to see the rest of Andruw Jones's career. He never was the same player, of course, after he left the Braves, spent some time with the Rangers and Yankees. So you kind of feel like, what could have been. But my goodness, the first 10 or 11 years of his career, he was definitely a fun player to watch.
Yeah, he was. And I mean, it just felt like he did drop off the face of the earth when he left the Braves. But then again, that's something we're probably always going to think when Braves players leave because we're just not watching them near as much anymore. Going back to Kumar Rocker, though, he's someone that was just so amazing the first 2 years that he was at Vanderbilt. And I was kind of surprised he didn't sign last year. And I wish that he would have came back and had another year of college baseball if he was going to choose not to do that, because that Vanderbilt team really needed him. I mean, this was a very poor year by Tim Corbin standards with Vanderbilt. And I mean, he definitely could have made a huge impact, and he's got such a cannon. And you kind of feel like when you watch him that he's someone that's only going to get better. You feel like he's got so much power, but the mechanics are still being worked on. And he's someone that has a huge upside and that is nowhere near reaching his potential yet.
Oh, absolutely. And, the disappointing factor about him not playing this year in college baseball at Vanderbilt is it's not like he totally set out a year. Like he played like on a professional level, just not in the minor leagues. And so it's not like he was trying to save himself from injury. And so you would have felt like it would have been really cool to see him play college baseball.
Yeah, definitely. And, he's definitely someone that I'm rooting for because his dad, Tracy Rocker's one of the most famous football players in Auburn history, probably the most well-known defensive tackle at Auburn. He won the Outland Award his senior year. I think he finished like fifth or sixth in the Heisman voting, and he was a first-team All-American 3 years in a row, which I think he might be one of the only Auburn players to ever do that. So, of course, he comes from great lineage right there. And when you look at Kumar, he's big like his dad is. He looks very similar to him. And you can tell that he's someone that probably had his choice of sports that he wanted to play, but he's choosing to use that power that he got from Tracy into pitching. And he's definitely made the right decision, I think.
Yeah, he has.
And yeah, I mean, you talk about Carl Crawford and Matt Holliday. That's, really good lineage for those two players right there. And so what an interesting, top 10 to have all of these guys going out.
Yeah, I mean, really excited to see how they fare and, kind of always have the comparisons to their dads. And we've already got, of course, Vladimir Guerrero's son, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., has been an all-star the last couple of years. And so we've seen him emerge. And so hopefully, some of these guys will too.
That's right. I mean, I think it kind of started in baseball when you think of Ken Griffey Sr. and Ken Griffey Jr. playing together. That was like the first one that kind of got put out there. And then since then, there's been definitely a lot of that with you seeing the sons playing after the fathers. But this is definitely a good crop coming in right now.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah. And Joe, speaking of old players from the past, this is not necessarily a father, but a father figure. The first player off the board for Auburn was Blake Burkhalter, which I think if you were to ask me, he would have been the one that I would have thought would have been the first player drafted from Auburn. But it's where he went to that makes me get a little bit of a father figure aspect to it. And he went in the second round to the Braves. And of course, his pitching coach, Tim Hudson, played for the Braves for a long time. And it's my understanding that he really, talked up Blake Burkhalter to him. And I think with that placement, with him getting drafted in the second round by them and the Braves having a little bit of a need at the closer position, that I think Blake Burkhalter is in a good position to maybe play pretty soon for the Braves.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if he was even included on a postseason roster, if he can have a good, rest of the summer and fall with the minor leagues, because there is a precedent. I can't remember the name of the player. I think it was who was it? It was a guy for TCU, Brandon Finnegan, back in 2014. He became the first player as a pitcher to pitch both in the College World Series at TCU and then also in the World Series with the Royals in the same calendar year because they called him up in time for the postseason. So there is precedent for that. And I feel like as a relief pitcher, there's a good opportunity to do something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you want to look at Auburn's success this year, so much of it was based on what Blake Burkhalter did. And especially when you look at the postseason, I don't know that he ever gave up a run. And that included coming in against Oregon State in some really tight situations in the 2 wins that Auburn had. I think both times he came in, they had multiple base runners on and no outs, and he got them out without any runs being put on the board. And he is a very, very solid reliever. And like I said, I mean, it's possible he might get to play this year, but I certainly would think that by next season, you're going to see Blake Burkhalter be one of the main relievers for the Braves.
Yeah, I think he'll have a fast track.
And Joe, on the other Auburn players, of course, no surprise that pretty much all of the first few players that you have getting drafted for Auburn are pitchers, because Butch Thompson, of course, that's where he got his start. I mean, what got him famous and what got him the Auburn coaching job was the job that he did as Mississippi State's pitching coach when they went to the College World Series. I think it was back in 2013 and made it to the championship series against UCLA. And, the next guys that they have in the third round, Auburn got Mason Barnett, pitcher drafted by the Royals. And then Trace Bright got drafted in the fifth round by the Orioles. And Bright's someone who I feel like he's got a lot of ability, but I never really saw him quite equal it. And I felt like he got teed off on a little bit in the College World Series. So I'd be interested to see if maybe he's someone that would consider coming back. because you could see that it's definitely a lot of raw ability that hasn't been tapped into. And in the 5th round, he may consider coming back. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he could. A lot of it, just depends on the signing bonus, because a lot of teams will kind of pick which players they want to commit, like their slot bonuses to, like monetarily. And like, let's say that they're really high on him, they might pay him more money. But if they're higher on some other prospects, he would get less of a signing bonus, which might make him more likely to want to come back.
That's right, Joe. And then, of course, everyone's favorite Auburn player also signed and also got drafted in the 5th round, and that's Sonny DeShera by the Angels. Unfortunately for a War Eagle Nation, you can't get Sonny DeShera back because he's a super senior. He was a graduate from Sanford before he transferred to Auburn, so he only had 1 season to play, but boy, did he make the most of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Definitely, had a storybook career and great story, and made it to the College World Series, so definitely went out on top.
That's right, Joe. And I also would, even if he did have a year left, I would say he's going to go to the pros, because I just saw that he just proposed to his girlfriend a month ago. So been quite the year for Sonny D, from home runs to being co-SEC player of the year, and now he's going to get married.
Oh, absolutely. You can't top that. And, I think, like we'll talk about probably in a minute, just the leverage you lose, if you come back, if you have that extra year, it really kind of defeats the purpose.
That's right. Yeah. So I think he's someone that, I'd like to think that I'm going to see him in the pros pretty, sometime soon, but it's going to be a little bit more of a road to hoe with him, because while he is such a great home run hitter, he lacks speed, and he lacks, I think, a lot of great ability at first base. He doesn't get to a lot of things. So, I mean, for him, I think his road to the major is going to be improving his speed and improving his defense. Those are the 2 main things for him. His hitting is at a pro level. It's just those other facets of the game need some work.
Well, the good news for him, Dan, is now that they have that universal DH, you now have 30 starting spots at DH across the league. And so a better chance to maybe get called up sooner.
That would be the best position for him, because I think he's got a long way to go to be a professional first baseman in my mind. But as a professional designated hitter, that could be a really good spot for him with the team.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
And then, Joe, other players that got drafted for Auburn: Carson Skipper, another quarterback, another pitcher for him. Hayden Mullins, also another pitcher. And then some of the infielders for Auburn. Blake Rambush got drafted in the 15th round by the Mariners, which he's someone that, I feel like he got docked for a lot for what happened during the postseason, because he was somebody that was hitting about 350 before Auburn switched into postseason mode. And he went 0 for 18 during the NCAA tournament and the College World Series. And I feel like that lasting image of him probably dropped him down a lot, because he was a very good hitter. He's a solid third baseman, and he's someone that had been at Auburn for a long time doing great things. And he's also, he's got great work ethic. Like, his family is all Marines. Like, he's someone that you would expect to, that I would have expected to have been drafted much higher. But I feel like the last impression is something that got him.
Yeah, I mean, he was uncharacteristic, probably an anomaly, because, postseason hitting is so different and really hard on anybody. But, probably some scouts were nervous about it, because you are facing the number ones of each team in the postseason. And so that probably was kind of glaring to him.
Yeah, they were probably thinking that when he faced the elevated competition, which, of course, when you get to the majors, that's what you're going to be facing. That was when he fell. And then also maybe that from a pressure standpoint, he's not going to be a guy that's going to deliver, when it matters. And now that's something that Blake can, of course, work on. But I got to think that equated to why he had such a precipitous fall.
I think so.
Yeah, and then the last Auburn player that got drafted in the 17th round was their shortstop, Brody Moore. So that was 8 players drafted for Auburn and Butch Thompson. And I think I saw that in the last 4 drafts, he's had 32 players drafted. So he's averaging about 8 a year. So definitely getting some really good talent in at Auburn.
That's a good number. The last few years with the pandemic, they're having fewer rounds. Like, I think they only had 20 rounds this year. They used to have like 50. And so it's much more prestigious to have players drafted now.
That's right, Joe. Well, speaking of prestigious, the Ole Miss Rebels coming off their first national championship in baseball, and they had a good haul of players get drafted also. And Joe, I know there were a couple of guys that were signees of Ole Miss that are never going to get to play because of the draft. They got drafted high, but I want to focus on the guys that actually played. And Joe, I was very surprised the first Ole Miss player to come off the board being Derek Diamond and getting drafted in the 6th round by the Pirates. I mean, I know he's a fine pitcher, but he's someone that for like the last half of the season you barely ever saw him.
Yeah, he started. I think we talked about it before the show. The one game in the tournament, in the NCAA tournament, I think it was the closeout game against Arizona in the Miami regional. Saw him warm up a few times in Omaha, but never entered the game. He was a guy, Dan, that entered college with a lot of promise. He got injured, I think, after the 2020 shortened season, and he never was the same. But it is kind of surprising to see somebody that went from being the Friday night starter to start this past season to not even playing in the College World Series, entering the transfer portal, and then suddenly he gets drafted in the 6th round.
Well, Joe, with all these things that have happened, would you rule out a return from Derek Diamond, or is he past his eligibility at this point?
He's got more eligibility, but I think he's going to sign from everything I've read and heard because, who knows what he would do next year in, any college, kind of based on the unpredictable nature of his career.
Yeah, that's quite a topsy-turvy career right there, and probably one where he feels lucky to be drafted in the 6th round.
Oh, absolutely. That's a good point.
Yeah. Joe, the next one, and then, speaking of getting lucky to be drafted in the 6th round, this is someone that I'm even more shocked, I would say, is going to be the next Ole Miss player off the board, because I would have thought in my mind he would have been towards the bottom of Ole Miss players drafted if he was drafted at all, and that's Hayden Dunhurst. He's usually a pretty good defensive catcher. He had some moments, especially in that Oklahoma series, that were not great. But, that's something he was usually solid on, and his hitting leaves a whole lot to be desired. So I was really surprised to see him be the next guy off the bat. And I'd say in the 6th round, Hayden Dunhurst is doing quite well for himself at that range.
Yeah, he got injured early in the season. I think it was like the second series of the year, missed a few weeks, and his bat was like really bad after that. Like he was pretty much just playing for defense the rest of the season. It reminds me, Dan, a lot of Cooper Johnson for Ole Miss, the catcher who was drafted a couple of years ago. He was also just a defensive guy and still got drafted, even though his bat was more of a liability. I do think, though, from everything I've heard about Dunhurst, he's a guy that in a year or two could be major league ready to start at catcher. And there aren't right now currently that many good offensive minded catchers. And so I do think there's a place for him at the next level, but he will need to improve in that regard.
Okay. Well, I wish him the best. I mean, he's someone that had been at Ole Miss for a long time, and, you can tell that the injury affected him. But that's something that you're right, Joe. I mean, you think about it, a lot of times I feel like when you leave outside the pitcher, the catcher is usually your weakest hitter. So that's not a very uncommon thing. And that's something that probably he has the ability to overcome to still get to play.
Well, it's also a position, the last thing I'll say, where it's a position that comes at a premium, not just anybody can do it. And so I think that gives you an advantage, moving up in the ranks.
All right, Joe. Now, this one right here in the 6th round was a huge shocker for me. In my mind, I probably would have thought he would have been the first guy off the board and would have came up a lot earlier, and that's Dylan DeLucia getting drafted in the 6th round by the Cleveland Guardians. What a great name. I hate that Cleveland's gone away from what they had before because that and not getting a cool name. But with Dylan DeLucia, he's someone that I know has a couple of years of eligibility left. And I kind of feel like he should come back because I'm kind of shocked at this level. I thought he was at least top 3 rounds worthy. And I would say that maybe he really should highly consider coming back. I think he could, with one more season, like what we saw at the end of the year, with a more of a look and, more tape for scouts to have, he could be a guy that could go up in the first couple rounds.
Well, it'd be fascinating if he returned because, he didn't start until midway on the SEC schedule. And so it would be intriguing to see if he could dominate from start to finish an SEC season as the Friday night starter. And what a luxury it'd be to have him and, having what's his name back on Hunter Elliott is the Saturday starter. I mean, that'd be awesome. But everything I've heard, though, I do expect DeLucia to sign. I think that he's probably going to approach this with the mindset that he won't be able to top how the season ended and that his stock may not be higher if he comes back.
Well, that's true. I mean, you can't have a better end to the season than what he had. And that's right now the lasting image he has. And what if you come back and then you have a season where you don't even come close to living up to those expectations? It could go the other way. So, I mean, it's a gamble just like anything else, but that'll be interesting to see what he does.
Well, the cool thing for him is, now he's like a hero for life. If he goes out now, like he can come to Ole Miss, like, for the next 50 years and just everybody just celebrates him.
He'll never have to buy a drink or a meal in Oxford. Never.
You're right.
All right, Joe. Moving down, we got Brandon Johnson, who is the closer for Ole Miss, getting drafted in the 9th round by the Royals. What do you think about this one, Joe? Do you think this was a place that he probably is about right for him, or do you think he could have gotten drafted a little bit higher than this?
I think it's about right. He's a strikeout pitcher. His ERA at times this past season was a little bit inflated. And so I think, though, he had a great finish to the year, obviously closing out the championship finale, striking out the side. So you can't go out on a better note. But he is going, to have to improve that ERA at the next level. I do think he'll probably sign if I had to guess.
Okay. That's right, because he went against their top 3 hitters back to back to back in that last half inning and struck them all out. That was like a real icing on the cake for what was a great tournament for Ole Miss.
Exactly.
All right, Joe. And then last, but certainly not least of the Ole Miss players that got drafted, that would be the hero of Oxford, Tim Elko, getting drafted in the 10th round by the White Sox. Joe, I mean, this is one where you wonder if he'll ever play in the majors, but you can't put anything past this guy doing it. And I'm glad to hear that he does get signed. And if there's any way that he can overcome his injury to the ability to be a Major League Baseball player, you got to believe he can do it.
Oh, without a doubt. Definitely don't want to bet against him. I think there's a pathway, kind of like we were talking about with Sonny D, if nothing else, to get some time as a pinch hitter or as a designated hitter on the next level. I think, this situation where he was drafted, obviously, he couldn't come back, so he doesn't have the leverage from a contractual standpoint. He's going to the White Sox in Chicago. But I think at the end of the day, Dan, this is kind of like we're talking about the opposite of DeLucia. Elko wanted the college experience. You can't put a price tag on that. And, he'll definitely look back on his life and his career with so many fond memories, and not just anybody can say that.
No, absolutely. I mean, let's say he went out last year and he got drafted in the 5th round and, coming off his injury, not getting to play the way he wanted to at the level and missing out on this opportunity to win the national championship, which he was the centerpiece, and was him and DeLucia were the 2 guys that you really think like motivated the team to get them to where they were at. And I mean, he wouldn't trade that for the world, especially someone who loves Ole Miss the way he does.
Yes. And even if it doesn't work out at the professional level, I mean, the money he probably earned just in his career, being able to do whatever he wants to now, like in Mississippi, like the floodgates are going to open for any career. So he definitely earned some money on that note at some point.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he definitely got to, he probably, if you think about it, if he doesn't succeed in the pros, the NIL money he got this year got to be very helpful to him. And it's a good thing he came back because he got to experience that too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right.
But one thing I'll say about Elko, though, he is such a great hitter, and that's going to help him at the next level to possibly have like a Sonny D type role. But he's also such a good first baseman in terms of the kind of balls he can get to, his intelligence. I mean, there was a play that he made against Southern Miss, and of course, there'll be a lot of Ole Miss fans that are rubbing it in Southern Miss's face. They didn't score any runs against Ole Miss, but there was one play where I think Elko jumped up and snagged a ball that probably would have scored 2 runs for Southern Miss. And it was one of the more incredible catches I've ever seen from a first baseman. And then you juxtapose that with the play that he made against Oklahoma. They got the runner interference. I mean, that was a heady play that I don't know that they call that play unless, he gets right in the way of that runner and does a little bit of the feigning with his hand to make it look even worse than it was. And that was just called Elko being an intelligent baseball player.
Yes, he's got that intelligence, to your point. He's also just got great awareness on defense. Like the game slows down to him, even though the ground balls and line drives are coming really fast. And an underclassman or another player, that doesn't have those tendencies would not have been able to make those plays. And that was definitely a very underrated component of what he brought to the table.
And, the biggest thing that I hope, Joe, is that if it doesn't work out, that he can go back and get a GA job with Bianco and get himself, possibly in the upper trajectory to maybe one day being Ole Miss's coach. Because to me, he just seems like a guy that just screams like he can be a head coach at whatever level he wanted to be.
I could see that. I could also eventually see maybe like an athletic director position as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that being said, just what a great year for Ole Miss baseball and, an amazing tournament. And, a lot of guys getting drafted. And, like I said, I'm just glad to see that Elko was able to get drafted after what an amazing career he had.
Yes, it worked out perfectly.
All right, Joe, when we come back, we're going to talk about an amazing surprise winner of the British Open and then a couple other pro stories. And you can listen to all of our episodes on Spotify. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch all of our recent episodes on there, the Dan and Joe Sports Show YouTube channel. And then you can follow us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show. And you can also like our Facebook fan page. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.